think my answer might be a little different than most people would expect, but it would
Yeah.
actually be to start from a place of compassion and not judgment.
Mm.
Because, these people are looking for relief. And I have so much compassion for these people because,
Yeah.
some of them are going through such
Mm.
serious physical challenges or maybe even mental trauma, stress that is just there. And there's only so much you can do about it. And so it's really meet them where they're at and let them know that this is a safe place to explore and express these things,
Yeah.
because then it really opens them up to be able to better communicate what challenges they're facing, why they're facing them, what they've tried before.
Welcome to the CoachMD podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I've made it my goal to help people create strong minds, healthy bodies, and unshakable spirits. And that's why I launched the CoachMD podcast, is to bring people on who really, in some respects, take their health into their own hands. And a lot of people will, really shrug and frown upon that. But actually, conventional doctors like myself, I was a conventional doctor in medicine, but I started challenging the status quo. I started to take a step back and say, is what we're doing, is this the best thing we could do for our patients? And really, sometimes the best health that you can get is by going to people who have studied outside the traditional paradigm of medicine and have done their own research and have gotten different certifications in areas of medicine that your regular doctor is just not going to be able to help you with. So my guest today is Mike Vera, who's a board certified health coach and the founder of Avantia Health. And what he does is he challenges the status quo of health. And not only does he do that, he has the Healthy and Awake podcast, which brings on people like Peter McCullough, who have really publicly challenged a lot of our conventions and a lot of sometimes aspects of medicine that have not really helped people, but have hurt people. And so, Mike is going to tell us about what he does and kind of how he navigates through and balances that, the conventional with, I don't like to say unconventional, because really, if you take a step back, a lot of the quote unconventional ways of dealing with health and wellness really should be mainstream and should be conventional. So thanks a lot, Mike, for coming on today. I really greatly appreciate you coming on the CoachMD podcast.
Dr. Glassman, it's great to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah. So, Mike had me on his podcast, Healthy and Awake, which we had a great conversation, and want to really dive into, what gets somebody to start exploring how to take care of themselves. And then by doing that, what's the next step where you can share what you've learned and impart it on other people?
Well, I think it's different for everybody,
Yeah.
because everybody has different goals and a different vision, and they just have different dynamics in their life. And that's one of the beautiful things about health coaching, is that you kind of meet someone where they're at, because believe me, there's a lot of coaching programs out there. Well, a lot of health coaching businesses. I'm going to put that in quotes,
Mm.
because you look at something like Noom, maybe they do some good work, but from what I've heard, it's really like a cookie cutter program. You're not even talking to a human most of the time. You're talking through text, and this coach is talking to 200 other people. So, as a health coach, I'm glad that I get to work with individuals and really not only understand where they're trying to get to, but I also understand them on a deeper level, and I help them understand themselves on a deeper level. And then from there, once you have that rapport build and that understanding, you can really go just about anywhere because quite frankly, a lot of people might start with, I want to lose weight, and they build some momentum there. And then it's like, wow, you know what? I realize now that I can control a lot more than I previously thought. And you'll find themselves just going above and beyond anything that they thought was possible. And, once you get to that point, that's just extremely rewarding, both for the individual who's making those things happen and the coach who kind of got to facilitate that a little bit as well.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds great. I came about calling myself Coach MD. We talked about this that patients would come to me and say they felt great when they sat and talked with me, and I had a special practice where I could sit down and talk with my patients, but most people don't have that relationship with their doctor, and even if they do have that, sometimes the doctors are just not versed in things that can, we're basically, let me put it this way, we're trained to kind of identify a disease and fix it, right? So, but there's no quick fixes, and that's the challenging thing. So I found myself coaching my patients more than anything, and most of it was not about medicine or about what pills to take. And so I'm sure that people come to you and they've seen doctors. And what are some of the things that you hear that they're saying about, they've gone to their doctor and their doctor maybe doesn't hear them or doesn't have time, or, with all due respect, a lot of my colleagues, they were upset with me when I was in practice and more upset with me now because it seems like I bash medicine and my colleagues, and I don't, because they're under a lot of pressure, and it's bang, bang, bang now that they're under the corporate umbrella a lot of times, and they have to see a number of patients, a quota, and so. But let's think about our patients and people who are looking for real help. What do they say to you? When they come to the doctor, and what do you do, and how do you kind of balance them with their own medical doctor or whatever, especially if they have a condition?
Well, I want to start by saying I have so much respect for doctors. I mean, I was always inspired by my own father, who's a medical doctor, and I wanted to be just like him. And even further, doctors like yourself who do make that effort to coach and who do try to go beyond what is, conventionally pushed or recommended or just part of the status quo of the system. Uh, but there are, in fact, a lot of doctors who don't seem to get it, or they're comfortable where they're at. And I do hear this from the people that I work with where, oh, I've been working with my doctor for X amount of years and nothing's improved. And they put me on more medications. And when that stops working, I'm put on another medication. And, most of these people want to get away from medications.
Yeah,
Some of them have value. Some of them help a lot of people. Even the people I work with
yeah,
seem like they really need to be on some of these medications.
yeah,
But, really, there is a lot we can do for our health. And a lot of these people just don't know how to start, which direction to go in, what's right, what's wrong. They don't want to make mistakes. They're constantly advertised and marketed to that this right here is the perfect answer. And so they kind of just need help making sense of that. And sometimes their doctors either don't know how to help them make sense of that, they just don't have the time, or the system doesn't permit them to help them make sense of that. And so that's why a lot of people come to me, is because not only do I, try to help them sort all this out and figure out what is right, what is the best path, but I'm also someone who, as I mentioned, has a lot of respect for the good medical doctors who do get it. And I talk to them on my show, like
yeah.
yourself, and so I try to bring a very informed perspective, and I think people recognize that.
Yeah, it's important to understand that there has to be a balance. And a couple of my examples that I use is that when the conventional thinking, conventional doctors, mainstream doctors, and I was a mainstream doctor. Yeah, I was recognized as a top doctor in the New York metro area, and I had these accolades, and people would look at me with respect. But I would always take a step back, and I would question. And so, for instance, prednisone, which is a corticosteroid, a steroid, okay, which is still used the same way it was used when I was in medical school 30 years, more than 30 years ago, almost 40 years ago. All right. And it's terrible. It's a terrible medication, yet we're injecting people with it all the time. We're giving them, it's a terrible medication. Sometimes you need it though. Okay. And this is what I'm going to say. Steve Jobs, he needed to get his tumor resected. He needed to cut it out. Okay. But what did he do? He elected to go kind of the more alternative or Eastern approach, and he thought he could meditate it away. And so I would say if he knew what caused that cancer, it would have worked. Okay. He could have maybe done that, but he didn't know what caused it. So cut it out first and then go and have it taken out. So sometimes you do need medication, but then take a step back, maybe go to someone like Mike, who can kind of navigate your life, help you navigate your life a little bit better, get it on track so you can eventually come off of the medications. And you had mentioned that you see people on medications and with conditions. What's your experience as far as getting people off medications, or at least scaling back on them? And how do they feel about that? And what's your experience?
Well, it can be tricky waters to navigate because, of course, I'm not a medical doctor, so
Right.
I'm not the type of person to say like, "Oh, definitely stop taking
Right.
that." You know,
Right.
so it is something that I have to be careful about, and so I'm always one to throw out disclaimers when I do talk about these things. And
Yeah.
you mentioned prednisone, for instance.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that I work with have chronic inflammatory conditions like
Mm.
rheumatoid arthritis, for
Yeah.
instance, is probably the biggest one that I see, where people are taking prednisone, methotrexate, and nowadays even a lot of them are taking Ozempic, Wegovy, all kinds of these GLP-1 receptor drugs. And so first there has to be a desire expressed, something like, you know what, I don't want to take these, because that I can help you set goals around that. But
Yeah.
again, I'm going to disclaim, like, I'm not telling you to. That's
Yeah.
really, you should talk to your doctor about
Yes,
these things.
absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
And but some people, and this is sometimes either appropriate or unfortunate, some people, it's presented to them as the answer, and like the only answer, and not much else is discussed. And so some people, like, they feel like they have an answer, and so they kind of stop there. But through our sessions, we get to explore further how, first of all, different behaviors might be affecting the manifestation of flares or symptoms.
Mm.
And then on top of that, what are some of the things that we can do about that? What are the different areas of lifestyle that we might explore and expand on to see where the most important areas are to focus on today? And that could be everything from fitness, nutrition, sleep, stress, avoiding toxic exposure, social support and community, circadian health. I mean, there really is a lot to explore. And even if one of those is really severely off, that can put someone in a serious predicament where that might be the exact reason they need the medications. And if they only address that just, on their own, they might notice it's not as much of a necessity.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great points. The inflammatory diseases like the rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus, psoriatic arthritis, um, they have the biologics, these like Humira, and these medications, sometimes you need them. I mean, people sometimes are really debilitated, but you don't want to have somebody on these for a prolonged period of time. So, because like the biologics, you see there's a disclaimer that they may cause cancer. Well, yeah, they can. I've seen it in my practice. They can cause cancer because they're tumor necrosis factor alpha blockers, and the TNF alpha. It says tumor necrosis factor. Okay, so that means it causes the necrosis, the killing of a tumor. Now, if you block that, but it's an inflammatory marker, what's called a cytokine, you use those biologics, it stops that. So you don't have the inflammation as much, but it can also unleash these kind of bad things. So you don't want to be on those forever. you maybe have to be on them, but you want to know, like you said, Mike, there might be something else causing it. And that's one thing that I made it a practice of when when I was in practice, that I would always try to find out what was really the cause of somebody's complaint. So for instance, this woman came to see me once, and she said that her stomach was in knots and she's having diarrhea and it's painful. And I just asked her a few more questions, and it turned out that her mother now had to come live with her. And her mother, she'd never had a good relationship with her mother. They'd always argued as children, as adult, as she got older. Now her mother had to come live with her. So don't you think that that had something to do with it? I mean, what got me going on writing my book, Brain Drain, one of the things was a guy came into my office asking for Xanax. And Xanax is an anti-anxiety drug. But when I started asking him more questions, it turned out that he was actually offered his dream job, basically. And he would start getting anxious in meetings, and it was a self-sabotage because he never thought that it was good enough for that. And so this was his body, his brain telling him that trying to protect him from that dream job, to make him embarrassed, make him get flushed and get anxious. So he asked me for Xanax. So like you're saying, exploring what's really going on. And so if somebody comes to you, let's say, patient, I don't know, comes to you with some type of inflammatory disease, or some, maybe not even a disease, just symptoms, and overweight, what's kind of the first thing that you would do to kind of, and they want help. They're on a laundry list of medications, but nothing's working. They're still, hypertensive. They define themselves. I'm a hypertensive. I'm a diabetic. They define themselves with their diseases. What's the kind of the first thing that you do to kind of start this process going and getting them healthy and well again?
I think my answer might be a little different than most people would expect, but it would actually be to start from a place of compassion and not judgment.
Mm.
Because, these people are looking for relief. And I have so much compassion for these people because,
Yeah.
some of them are going through such
Mm.
serious physical challenges, or maybe even mental trauma, stress that is just there. And there's only so much you can do about it. And so it's really meet them where they're at, and let them know that this is a safe place to explore and express these things,
Yeah.
because then it really opens them up to be able to better communicate what challenges they're facing, why they're facing them, what they've tried before. Because, again, the medications can be very helpful. It does, in many instances, provide the temporary relief that they're looking for. But again, going back to something like prednisone, I know very well from the people that I work with that it often causes other additional problems that
Hmm.
they then have to deal with. I mean, weight issues, so they're holding more
Yeah.
water, and then that
Yeah.
makes them wonder if they should take Ozempic, or maybe it causes some kind of body dysmorphia where they start severely restricting calories in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
And it could cause mood swings and appetite issues and all these different things. And so it's like you're trying to solve one problem with this pill that causes new problems, where then another pill is presented. And all of this, it just requires that compassion, because for somebody who doesn't deal with this and somebody who doesn't get it, it can be very easy for somebody to just judge them and go, well, you should be working harder, or, well, just stop taking those medications and deal with it. And,
Right.
that's totally judgmental, and it's not compassionate at all. So I do think that, that understanding is really important to have any kind of productive conversation and coaching relationship in order to be able to accomplish better health.
Yeah. Well, you say on your website about challenging the status quo in a way. And to me, that's it's, and your podcast is called Healthy and Awake. And because, I don't like to, use kind of terms that are inflammatory, like woke or whatever, but really being healthy and awake is being truly awake, truly woke, but not in the sense that we have used it politically. But awake means, asking questions, taking a step back, and challenging the status quo. You have to understand, like, you grew up in a where your father was a doctor, and my children have grown up with their dad as a doctor, and I always had I have a saying, one of my favorite sayings to my adult children now, and when they were growing up, is that it's something, but it's nothing. Okay. So it's very important to be able to figure out when something is really a problem, And I think I was good at that when I was a practicing physician, and my patients knew that if I said, you got to go to the hospital, they knew I wasn't being dramatic. They knew I wasn't practicing CYA medicine. And just because I might get sued for the minuscule possibility that they could have something bad, it was really because I could identify that something was wrong. And, I get a sense that, when someone comes to you, you're balancing it, very well. But when you say and I love your guests, and your guests do that. Is there anything that you see in your practice that is kind of the status quo that's getting your patients or your clients to kind of go the wrong way, or get on the wrong track? They've come to you because they kind of want to get on the right track, but what are some of the challenges that you see in that status quo that's really a roadblock or a
There's
speed bump?
Yeah, there's two things in particular. One is that as far as healthcare goes, we've pretty much been fed one narrative. And there's a lot to that, but if I had to say it concisely, it's basically that we're going to wait for you to get sick and then we'll deal with you. And
Mm,
usually that involves the medications that we've discussed today.
yeah.
And a lot of people are frustrated by that because that's more of what people call a sick care system
Hmm.
than a healthcare system. And we know very well there's so much that can be done for health and preventative health, and lifestyle's a big element, which is just completely left out of the mainstream conventional healthcare system, where it's basically, you go to the hospital and you get some kind of treatment once you're already in some kind of problem. And so people recognize that. I think more and more every day, people are starting to recognize that, and therefore they're looking for more.
Mm,
That maybe sometimes something happened to a family member and they say, look, I don't want to end up like that. I want to
yeah.
start addressing my health now. So that's one side of things, is that single narrative that we've been fed. The other thing is the landscape that we're in. We are constantly surrounded by a bombardment of influence. So
Mm,
every time you watch TV, you open up your phone, you turn on the computer, you talk to a friend, we are surrounded by influence nudges that very often we don't pay attention to. And the question is, how can we be fully in control of making the best decisions that we can for our health or for anything else if we aren't acknowledging those influence efforts against us? And it's constantly happening. It's almost like people are hijacking our thought process.
mm,
And I can give you a quick example, just
yeah.
something that people can relate to. It's like I go into the store Target and I say I want to buy two things. And then we leave the store and we have a cart full of stuff. What happened there?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
well, it's not an accident. We were deliberately influenced through the messaging, the product placement, the colors, the lighting. Corporate executives planned exactly how they can influence you.
Mm,
So if they can be successful at influencing you, I guarantee you can be successful at influencing yourself. And I think that's a big key missing component in the health discussion.
yeah, that's brilliant. I love that, Mike. The wellness part in medicine, it's that's why, I do this podcast, and I've written what I've written, because you don't go to a doctor to get well. First of all, it's an individual journey, okay? And most of the wellness programs in medicine are really uh, they tell you to get early detection or whatever. It's not really wellness, and your doctor may say eat well and exercise, but they don't really tell you how to eat well and how to exercise. And that, that's where you come in. Because I didn't learn how to stay well getting into my, mid 60s, right? From my medical textbooks or what my doctor said, or reading, medical journals. No, I learned how to stay well mainly from reading people like you, or reading, Men's Health magazine, or listening to podcasts or whatever. I've learned a lot of how to really stay well and how to age gracefully and healthfully. So that's why I encourage people that, it's not the doctor's fault unless the doctor is really interested in that for themselves. They're not going to get that knowledge to be able to impart it on, my listeners, my, patients, people. They're not going to be able to do that. So, that's why going to a certified health coach, a licensed health coach is important to be able to do that. And what you said about the influences, now the big, the kind of the big coup that happened in the 90s and early 2000s is when pharmaceutical companies were allowed to advertise on television. And I have a whole theory about, which is kind of, when I've dug a little deeper, it seems to be the case. I'll go on. I'm not going to talk about that on this program now, but that's a big influence on us. And you have doctors, you have people going to the doctor's office saying, "Oh, I want that." One of the big things are the immunizations, telling people that they need immunizations. Let's say for pneumococcal pneumonia, they feel like they get the advertisement, "Oh, I have to get my pneumococcal pneumonia shot because I don't want to get pneumonia." Meanwhile, what they don't realize is pneumonia is a term for an infection of the lungs. It doesn't mean it's coming from this very particular type of bacteria, which is called pneumococcal, which in my whole career of over 30 years, I may have seen, I don't know, 5 cases, if that. Um, and people will say, "Oh, that's because people immunize." No, the immunizations for pneumococcal pneumonia were increasing and getting more specialized, and now they're recommending it for all sorts of things. And really, you get that getting that commercial saying that, "Oh, I don't want to get pneumonia." So people would come into my office and say, "Oh, I want to get that shot so I don't get pneumonia." And I'd have to explain to them that only if you're high risk and 65 or over high risk do you need to get that shot, because it's a very uncommon. Basically, you get it yourself. You inhale pneumococcal from your own flora and it gets lodged in your lungs, whatever. Anyway, that's just an example. There's so many other examples, but I like that you identify that and coach people to understand that that's the status quo. The status quo is telling you to do all these things. I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
I mean, what a great sales pitch too. It's like, look, we're going to help you prevent this illness, and all you have to do is show up once, pull up your sleeve, and you're good to go. And I say sales pitch because there is a lot of money behind these efforts, and I don't mean to sound like I'm anti, these technologies at all. I mean, I've had a whole bunch of them myself, even growing up as a little kid.
mm,
I have the list right next to me, actually. And, I do see the value in those technologies when they're used appropriately and carefully, and safety testing has been done. But, nowadays it's presented as the holy grail, and everybody needs all of them all the time. And I just think that's something being worth suspicious about, at least a little bit.
yeah, yeah, because our immune system is wonderful and it learns things, and so just going on with the immunizations. My children got all the basic immunizations, but they didn't get overboard. They never got a flu shot. No, none of my children got a flu shot, because why would I give them a flu shot? If they got the flu, their immune system would be strong enough to fight it. And if they were exposed to somebody who was in risk of getting the flu, getting hurt from the flu, those people have gotten the flu shot. So if you believe in the immunization, you believe that the immunization would protect them. And the same thing goes with, COVID and so many others, is that if you believe that that immunization is working, you don't need to force people who who have robust immune systems to get it, because the people who don't have robust immune systems who get it, well, if you believe in it, you believe it's going to protect them, so you don't need to, worry about them. So, it's the thing is that when there's a balance that needs to be made, and I guess navigating that is so important. And getting back to the whole idea of needing other people besides doctors who are sometimes just in the mainstream. They're getting their information from 3 journals. Okay, the New England Journal of Medicine. For me, it was the Annals of Internal Medicine because I was an internist, and JAMA. And if you look at those journals now, I don't trust them. I really don't, because they are, you read that they're not interested in curing cancer anymore. They're interested in all these kind of social issues, and that really, I want to cure cancer, or I want to get people like you're doing, get them healthy. I mean, it's really, and so for one thing, if the only way they survive is from advertisements. The journals get their money from the advertisements, and they're all from the pharmaceutical industry. And I know you're not bashing pharmaceutical the industry. I'm not bashing the pharmaceutical industry. They do great work, and there's so many great cures or treatments, but it doesn't have to be for everybody. So let's say somebody comes to you, Mike, and I've had this in my career, and they'll say, "Yeah, I don't want to be on medication." And you look at them and you say, I mean, you need to be on medication. I mean, how do you balance that? How do you talk to those people?
Well, again, it's something I have to be very careful about. I
Yeah.
just throw out a million disclaimers and emphasize that they talk with their doctor. And, it is a fine line to walk, because I might actually know, I might realize that maybe some of these people aren't taking their medications, and they're going to just
Mm,
say, "Oh yeah, I hear you. Talk to my doctor first." There's only so much I can do about that, right? I can't
yeah.
force people. I can't be there in their kitchen and force them to take these pills. Some people just aren't going to take it. And, that can go either way.
Yeah.
Some people have told me, you know what, I got to admit to you, Mike, I haven't been taking my medications, and I feel better. And after I started feeling better, I told my doctor then afterwards, and I'm just going to keep going with it. I'm going to keep going and working on my health as we've been doing. And that's great. That's ideal.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, there are absolutely some instances where people, especially with something like RA or lupus,
Yeah.
where they'll say, yeah, I stopped going for my regular infusions, and I just feel awful right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've been in a flare for the past month. And so I think I have to go back. And, that's a perfect example of a situation where the medication seems to be very helpful, and it's something they realize themselves. Maybe I do need this, at least for now. And maybe I can continue to work on other things so I can get off of these medications. But I could tell for the moment, it seems like I need this. And that even spills over to something you and I discussed on my show, which is separate from these inflammatory conditions, and
Yeah.
that is taking these weight loss drugs for obesity.
Yeah.
Now, I think the way it's presented to us today, most people don't need these. And you
Yeah.
know that because they're not doing anything at all for their health. They're just, they just want the easiest possible solution as a means to continue to not working on their health. And, I think that's unfortunate. And that's kind of the nature of the capitalist society that we're in. And I'm not criticizing that.
Right.
But, at the same time, I do think there are people who maybe they're morbidly obese. And I mean that clinically.
Yes.
Maybe
Yeah.
they are seriously obese to the point where it's like a potential walking emergency.
Yeah.
And they could get a lot of value out of taking these weight loss drugs,
Yes.
at least until they get to a point where they can be able to do more things on their own and be more active and work on their diet. And that might be the boost that they need. Hopefully not, but maybe it is. You know, it's a very delicate process and it's very individual.
Yeah, that's the key, individual. And, I know the medical education, and basically medical education, the hot shot doctors, when you're on rounds, when you're a resident or a medical student, you're the hot shot if you could spit it out. You spit out the list, the attending doctor who's taking you're in a group, right? You have the attending doctor who's the doctor in practice who's volunteering his time or her time, and then you have the group of doctors, the residents who have finished medical school, who are treating patients in the hospital. Then you have the medical students, and the attending doctor will say, "What's the differential diagnosis?" And the one who could spit it out like that is the star, is a superstar. It's an ego boost. The one who could spit out the medications, oh, this one for that, this one for that. They're the superstar. So then you come into practice, and it's kind of like you have this cookbook approach, and someone comes in, and you have this one way of dealing with it. And as you said, it's individual, but doctors don't have the time to take a step back and to really, you're out the door before you can raise your hand and say, "Oh no, but my shoulder's hurting me also." "Oh no, come make an appointment for a full physical." That was my line before I changed my practice. After 14 years in practice, seeing 40 to 50 patients a day, that was my line. Someone come in with a sore throat or cough, whatever, and you have to just deal with it, get right there. And if they start, "Yeah, my shoulder's been hurting me for the last 3 months," I say, "Go out and make an appointment for a full physical, 3 months later," or whatever. I mean, that's how it was, unfortunately. And so it's really hard to individualize that, for a doctor to have that time. And that's why I changed my practice, after 14 years. But I guess, probably schedule it a little differently, right? Approach. So for instance, a patient, I want to kind of really let people know what the difference is about going to you and going to their doctor for a lifestyle overhaul, a wellness, because you can't get that walking into the doctor's office and saying that you want to lose weight, coming in for a sore throat, "I want to lose weight." So they'll come to someone like you, and what what's the process, the first visit, and then how long is the process? What's the follow-up like?
Yeah. Well, so the first visit, that's the initial consult where not only are they getting a feel for what it's like to be health coached, because a lot of people are still not familiar with that at all,
Yeah.
but I also get a better understanding of where they're trying to get to. What are they trying to accomplish? Because that helps us orient each of our sessions. And so once I learn that, I share a little bit more about how I can help. And that usually entails the regular meetings where we meet once a week, which
Okay.
helps with accountability. That's a big thing. So when I
Yeah.
ask for feedback, accountability comes up time and time again, because all of us have been there where we might articulate some kind of goal or even not articulate it. We might have this idea in our head and it's easy to get distracted, or maybe we slip up and then we never pick it up again. And so the accountability helps make us make sure that we're going to stay on track. But board certified health coaches specifically are trained in a few different skill sets. One of them is motivational interviewing, where
Mm.
we are really listening on a deep level, on a level, quite frankly, that most people are not used to experiencing, because it's not the same as everyday conversations with your friends, where most of the time they're kind of just waiting for you to stop talking so that
Right.
they can say the best thing that's going to be a
Right.
perfect response.
Yeah.
But we're really deeply, deeply listening, and we're trying to pull the best out of you. And how can we use those strengths towards this goal that you're working on? What successes have you had in the past? Okay, so, you have achieved some things before. How do we get back to that? Or how do we move forward, even if you haven't been in a place like that? And so it's really responding to some of the thoughts that are in your head, some of the ideas, some of the goals, Motivation is a big part of it. Some people will say, I'm just not motivated to do it. I mean, we can spend a few sessions talking about motivation because that means a lot of different things. And again, if those target corporate executives can motivate you to buy some things that you don't need, I bet you can motivate yourself towards things that you actually want or maybe even need. And the question is, how do we leverage our environment and our habits to be able to have that motivation, which is, again, motivation itself, we can talk about forever.
Yeah.
So there's really a lot to it, a lot of psychology, accountability, communication skills, listening, and building on successes, habits, and having that momentum and trying to keep it going.
Yeah, it's great to have a coach that can help one with the enormous amount of information on the internet. And there's people now who have very popular podcasts, who have so many things that you need to do in a day to stay healthy, with all the different science behind those things. And it's just not practical to implement those things when you have a job, when you have a family, when you have, if you're by yourself and you only have yourself to take care of, maybe, and you have no job, okay, maybe you could do the 50 things you need to do on a daily basis. So it's great to have a coach to help individualize that, keep you accountable, and help see which one of those things are the most practical. And as you said, I had done a podcast with somebody who said that, yeah, I mean, we're all disciplined, okay? We're all disciplined. We may be disciplined doing the wrong stuff, but we're disciplined doing it. So, like you said, you're motivated. Okay, you're obviously motivated to sticking to a habit that's not working for you or that's getting you sick. Then you can be motivated doing something that will keep you well. And that's I think is really important. I think that's a great one of the other things that you were talking about, that reminded me of how talk about challenging the status quo. There's so many people, including myself, get heartburn. And 35 years ago, I hate to attack the drug companies again, but the pharmaceutical industry attached heartburn with cancer. Well, it wasn't only the pharmaceutical industry, but their influence attached the possibility that if you have heartburn, you run the risk of developing what's called Barrett's esophagus, which can ultimately lead to cancer. And once that was attached, then the PPIs, the proton pump inhibitors like Prilosec, which was the first one, became the #1 sellers of all medications, because people got afraid that if they didn't take this and cut their heartburn, then they're going to get cancer. And it turns out that those studies were based on, first taken from a study from 1970 by a Dr. Barrett, who was a surgeon who noticed there were some changes in the esophagus with cancer. And then that got extrapolated to eventually say that if you have heartburn, you're causing inflammation, which leads to cancer. So I had a patient who was diagnosed with Barrett's esophagus, didn't want to go on the PPIs, which I'll dedicate another podcast to just that. Okay. And, my colleagues would get on my case when I didn't want to put my patients on that in the hospital, and that's a whole other story. But he didn't want to go on any of these medications. So we devised a plan that was more of a health-based plan, as well as certain targeted supplements. And he went back for an endoscopy a year later, and I told him, and you said how patients will sometimes not tell their doctor what they're doing, and the doctor will just say, keep doing what you're doing. And he did the same thing. The esophagus was completely clear, and the doctor said, oh, keep doing what you're doing, taking the PPI that the doctor thought he was taking, which he wasn't. And he was doing the regimen that I had put him on. And that's the kind of thing that when you talk about individualized, you have to find out if a person is in a sense brave enough to do that. And when I say brave enough, that's to challenge the status quo, because it's listening to people like you, or listening to people, a doctor like me, who is going against the street, basically, the mainstream, saying that you should take these things because you don't want to get cancer, you know. So that's having a coach like that. I'm sure that you have experienced that, where you've had to kind of really help that person, with that journey that they're on.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
and that even ties into what we were talking about just before that. And I think this is kind of related, but kind of not.
Yeah.
One thing about coaching is I don't want people working with me forever. I mean, don't get me wrong, that'd be nice.
Right.
I'm getting paid, so keep working with me. But
Right.
at the
Right.
same time, really the whole purpose of this is to self-empower them.
Mm,
They need that autonomy. And one way to think about that is people can be quite disciplined, as you indicated, when it comes to especially other people's obligations. Maybe my friend asked me for something, my boss asked me for something. You bet when people's
right.
boss asks for something, if they want to keep their job, they get it done. They stick to their schedule. They show up to work
Mm,
consistently. It's like, okay, so you have the ability to be consistent with going to work and with your obligations and doing the laundry and being a good friend. So it's like, why is there a disconnect when it comes to those things that are important to you, your health and self-care and your stress? And I think actually the answer, believe it or not, is the same thing that your work is using to keep you consistent. So it's like, well, they're using what are called standard operating procedures. These
mm,
are pre-made decisions that help ensure that you're not making mistakes, that you're doing things as efficiently as possible. And those are things that you're doing for somebody else, for your boss. And look, astronauts use this, pilots use this, brain surgeons use this. This is what it takes to be consistent and get things right. So, a big part of what it takes for you to get your health right and stay motivated and consistent is to have some kind of procedures in place, standard operating procedures, which can also be quite similar to time management. And for some people, that's something as simple as using a Google Calendar to schedule in when you're going to go to the gym. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe you've tried that before and it doesn't work, and there's plenty of other options out there that we can explore. And that might even mean building your own system. If these
mm.
companies are building their own systems to help keep you on track, well, you absolutely can build your own sort of system to help keep you on track with your health and with everything else. And I find that is really something that a lot of health coaches miss, is having, helping people implement those procedures, because once that's in place and it's actually standardized, as standard operating procedures would indicate, it is life-changing, because it gives them a foundation to not only achieve what they want to achieve, but they can just keep building and building. They have this system that they can keep tweaking so
Mm.
that it can manage all of the things on their plate, in addition to their other obligations. That is one of the most powerful things that somebody can do.
Yeah, I love that, Mike. Standard operating procedure, and that's what we all need, a little bit of that to get us on the right path, and to start forging a new path. And if you were never well, getting well, and making that a priority, and healthy aging, a healthy lifespan, a health span, rather than just not dying and staying, getting old and living longer. It's not about that. It's about living healthfully and a health span. And so Mike, I really greatly appreciate you coming on, and urge my audience to check out MikeVera.com. Listen to the Healthy and Awake podcast on all the major podcasts, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and check out Avantia Health. And I know that we all need that kind of accountability and standard operating procedure to stay well. So, yeah, Mike, thanks again. I look forward to keeping this conversation going, and uh, talking with you again. And And you have, I'll be on your podcast coming out soon, and I'll definitely share that all around. So until next time, I'm Dr. Charles, aka Coach MD, urging you to stay strong in mind, in body, and in soul, and always challenge the status quo, because more answers than not lay outside of that than within it. So until next time, bye for now.